Good morning to you and welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Monday morning. Hope you've had a lovely weekend, and as always, thank you so much for being with us for our Bible reflection for today, continuing our adventure through the book of Joshua. And to set the scenes of what's happened so far is that Moses has died, Joshua has taken over. He's God's appointment. He's been told to be brave and be strong and be courageous, but also to fear God. They've been told to cross the River Jordan, and in chapter 3 they crossed it. And here in chapter 4 this morning, we have kind of what happens just afterwards. So, Joshua chapter 4, here goes. When the entire nation had finished crossing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Select 12 men from the people, one from each tribe, and command them. Take 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood. Carry them over with you, and lay them down in the place where you camp tonight." Then Joshua summoned the 12 men from the Israelites, whom he had appointed, one from each tribe. Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, one for each of the tribes of the Israelites, so this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, 'What do these stones mean to you?' then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off from in front of the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the Israelites a memorial forever." The Israelites did as Joshua commanded. They took up 12 stones out of the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord told Joshua, carried them over with them to the place where they camped, and laid them down there. Joshua set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the covenant had stood, and there they are to this day. The priests who bore the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord commanded Joshua to tell the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. The people crossed over in haste. As soon as all the people had finished crossing over, the ark of the Lord, then the priests crossed over in front of the people. The Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over armed before the Israelites, as Moses had ordered them. About 40,000 armed for war crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for battle. On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. The Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant to come up out of the Jordan." Joshua therefore commanded the priests, "Come up out of the Jordan." When the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord came up from the middle of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. The people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. Those 12 stones which they had taken out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal, saying to the Israelites, "When your children ask their parents in times to come, 'What do these stones mean?' then you shall let your children know, 'Israel crossed over the Jordan here on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we crossed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever.'" And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, so the people of God crossed over the River Jordan, and it was obviously a river to get over. So what happened is the ark and the priests went into the river, and as they did, the waters stopped and became dry ground, and then the people crossed in front. And when the people had all got over on dry ground, the priest and the ark went on, and it kind of went on from there, and the water came back as before. So what we have here is kind of the aftermath, really, and it's quite interesting because it's quite clear that it's happened by a miracle. The Bible is abundantly clear that the water stopping is an act of God. In the truest sense, it is a miracle. And undoubtedly, the writer of Joshua believed that this was a miracle, that God stopped the waters while the priests stood there so that the people of God could cross over on dry ground into the promised land. And that's what happened here in chapter 3, and we hear a bit more about it in chapter 4. So what happens now is, as a memorial, what they have, they kind of set up a kind of memorial to remember this, And what they do is they take some stones where the priests had been standing, which had been wet but was been dry while they were standing there. They picked up 12 stones, kind of, that's like a high priest was here kind of thing. They pick up 12 stones and they take them with them as a memorial, and they put them down where they go. And this memorial, as I say, is to be a memorial, a reminder of what happened. Now, there's just one or two comments to make about this memorial. As the church, we love our memorials, and they're often controversial things. But let me tell you what's going on here. Firstly, they pick up 12 stones from the dry ground, which was at the time in the middle of the Jordan. 12 stones represent the 12 tribes of Israel, Reuben and all the other ones. And so, in a sense, having 12 means one for everybody. So it means all the people of God, because not all the people of God actually did live in what we nowadays Israel. Some 2.5 tribes lived elsewhere. But to remind them that this act of God had been done for everybody, there were 12 stones representing all the people of God. In other words, what God did on that day in the River Jordan, he did for all the people, not just a few. And having 12 means encompassing everybody. And you often see the number 12 pick up in the Bible quite a lot. You have 12 disciples, you have 12, lots of 12s, if you want, it's quite in the book of Revelation and so on, say 12 disciples, 12 tribes of Israel, all meaning representing all the people of God. So you have 12 stones representing for everybody, including those who didn't actually live in the promised land eventually, but 12 meaning one for everyone. So it's a memorial for everyone. That's what it's trying to say here. It's a kind of thing for inclusive, bring all the people of God here together. Then what I think is interesting also is to do with the memorial itself. Now it's interesting because it says twice in chapter 4 here what the memorial is for. And it says quite clearly that this pile of stones gets set up really so that in future children will say to their parents, hey, see that pile of stones over there? What's that all about? Thus, the parents have the opportunity to say to the children, well, children, that's why that pile of 12 stones reminds us of the time when God helped us dried the ground up so we can get into the promised land, and God did it on our behalf. And in a sense, the pile of stones is there to kind of encourage children to ask questions, to remind the people into generation to generation to generation what God did. And in a sense, we have memorials to this day. We have things like church buildings and so on. And it's brilliant, actually, when groups of school children and so on come around and they say, hey, what's that thing over there mean? And you have opportunity to tell them, about, what's that man on the cross mean? And you can tell them all about Jesus. And of course, we also have things like like baptism and the symbolism of that. Children ask, hey, what's all that water all about? Why is he putting oil on the head of that child? Or whatever it may be. Holy Communion, the bread and the wine, do this in remembrance of me. Hey, you might say, child, why do you do that funny thing on a Sunday morning? What's that all about? And it's meant to have an air of mystery about it. So people in church are thinking, that funny thing that they're doing at the front, what's that all about? And they ask questions and they find out. And it's quite clear, it's because it says it twice in chapter 4, that this pile of stones is so that in future, when children ask their parents, what's that pile of stones are for? It's there to, then the people can say to their children, hey, well, that reminds us of the time when God made the river, held the river back so we could pass by into the promised land. It's a reminder of acts of God, and things that we should do should remind us of things that God has done in the past. And our ceremonies, our buildings, and the things that we do should make people want to ask questions, because that's what this pile of stones was for, to get people to ask and find out, therefore, the greatness of God and remind people what God has done. Then finally, on this crossing the Jordan River, if you read it carefully, it's clearly meant to sound a bit like Moses crossing the Red Sea. As Moses crossed the Red Sea by a miracle, and the people went across out of Egypt, so likewise here they miraculously crossed the River Jordan into the Promised Land. And there's lots of things you can say about this. It could complete the double miracle, you might say. But I think what it's saying here, what happens here is the stature of Joshua increases. As Moses took the people across the Red Sea, so Joshua took them over the River Jordan. And the stature and the faith of Joshua becomes like that of Moses. And it says here, as they were in awe of Moses, so from here on in, they are in awe of Joshua. And it kind of, because what God does through Joshua's leadership, if you like, reminds them of Moses, And as they were with Moses, so they are with Joshua. And this is really important because they're about to do some things like conquer Jericho, and one or two other things as well. And they're going to need faith in their leader. And this reminds them that as God had been with Moses, so God is with Joshua. So you can follow him. And it's, in a sense, it's a sign of divine approval of Joshua's leadership and what Joshua is and what Joshua was doing. So a fascinating reading this. They've just crossed the Jordan River and they set up this pile of stones. 12 stones to remind them that this miracle was for everybody. It's a pile of stones which is designed to encourage people to ask questions. What's this about? Especially children, to remind them of what the great things that God has done. But also, in a sense, to do this by following Joshua's leadership as he led them through across the what would have been water, the dry land, as he had with Moses. So he's doing with Joshua now, increases Joshua's stature. He is God's man for the moment. And God is saying to the people here, follow Joshua because he's my man. Friends, lots to talk about there, lots of things for you to think about. Have a lovely day. Thank you for watching. Do please share this message with your friends. Just put the like button at the bottom or share the share button at the bottom. Have a lovely day. God bless you. And more from John.